This podcast is offered through the Sacred Community Project, an interspiritual collective working to lower the barriers of access to contemplative and devotional practices. Through the universal teachings of love, service, remembrance, and truth, SCP utilizes modern technology to promote eternal values. Learn more at sacredcommunityproject.org.
Hello, my name is Free. That's my nickname. I go by Free. And today I'm doing the podcast for the Sacred Community Project. And we're honored to have a special guest, Ramananda John Welshons. Say hi, John.
Hi.
So I want to introduce myself. I'm a participant in the Sacred Community Project, and I'm a meditation student of John. I'm going to call him John. His whole long title, Ramananda John Welshons. For this morning, let's just say John. And John is a meditation teacher, and we meet on Wednesdays. And he's also the author of several powerful books, including One Soul, One Love, One Heart. And let's see, Prayers Aren't Answered. Oh, Awakening from Grief. Later, we're going to talk about grief because a Sacred Community Project has a grief workshop. I mean, they have a lot of things. Yeah, let me say something. Sacred Community Project, the heart of it is the satsang hangouts they have on Discord. And in addition to those satsang hangouts, they also have spiritual support. We have a video chat, phone, email, handwritten support for those seeking spiritual support. And we also have the satsang hangouts. Honestly, that's the thing I'm the most involved in. Yeah, I was going to share how I got involved with that satsang on the Discord. I met Sitaram Dass, who is the President and CEO of the Board of Directors of Sacred Community Project, about in the year 2012, because I was at a retreat for Ram Dass, one of our teachers. John and I have that teacher, Ram Dass, and there was a part of the retreat where they have a mala bead ceremony, and it was at Ram Dass's house, and Sitaram Das was there playing on the harmonium because he was one of the main caregivers for Ram Dass at that time. And so I met him and we became friends. We stayed friends all the time. And so when I heard about the Sacred Community Project Satsang Hangout from him, I got involved in it and I went to it. What I wanted to share about those is I've been in some therapy groups in the past that were helpful, but this is better. Let's just say, this is better. People really appreciate it and get a lot out of it. Having a place to share their whatever they want about their lives and what's going on with them. So, John, can you say something more about your class?
Oh, well, you've been attending Wednesday evening class. It's Wednesday evening in New Jersey, where I am. And on Hawaii, on Maui, it's 1 p.m. But we do that live almost every week for 2 hours. And it's a wonderful group of people we have now and a beautiful opportunity to get together. We used to meet live in person at the place that sponsors us called Van Vleck House, which is a beautiful space in Montclair, New Jersey. And when the pandemic hit us 4 years ago, we started meeting on Zoom. And I initially thought that was going to be sort of a disappointment compared to being in person, but it turns out to be just wonderful, and to me, it creates the same kind of powerful space as being together meditating. And, people don't have to drive. Especially, it also makes it possible for people like you to come on from Hawaii. We have people from California, Washington State, Oregon, Texas, Florida, New England. So they're all over the country. And, I've just enjoyed it so much. And it's allowed everybody to get to know each other. The regulars get to know one another and then meet outside of the class, which is lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can say since I've been at them, I know what it's like. It's like ohana. Well, I live on Maui, so I use a Hawaiian term for family, ohana, or we can say satsang, and that's what they say in Sacred Community Project. So they have a similar meetings, satsang hangout, which is on the Discord. So, I mean, meditation is a broad topic. What kind of meditation are you doing on the Wednesdays?
On Wednesdays, we're doing primarily a practice called Vipassana, which means mindfulness or insight. So it's really the lineage from which mindfulness meditation emerged. And I think it was just easier in the United States to call it mindfulness because people can't remember the name Vipassana. Vipassana translates as either mindfulness or insight. And then the actual practice is called anapanasati, which means mindfulness of breathing. So we're really using the constant sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath to focus our attention, to bring us into the moment, just simply by paying attention to what's happening in the body. We breathe in, we breathe out, every moment of every day, hopefully. And so the regularity of the breath offers us this incredible opportunity to tune in to what is sometimes known as the eternal now. Ram Dass offered us originally that wonderful book called Be Here Now. And the realization is that there's only one moment ever, I mean, we can think about the past and we can think about the future, which is one of the amazing characteristics of our human brain. And it's also one of our problems because we're constantly thinking about the past and the future instead of being in the moment, which is the only time that life ever really happens. Otherwise, it's just happening as a dream in our mind. But right now, this moment, you and I connecting. So that's really what our meditation is about. And we do it in a few different ways. But the primary practice being anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing.
Thank you. I love that. That's my favorite kind of meditation myself because, the Buddha taught that, and not only taught it, he practiced it himself. I love that. Matter of fact, I first got involved in Vipassana when I took a 10-day Vipassana retreat on the Big Island of Hawaii. And it was taught in the style of Goenka. They even played tapes with Goenka. And Goenka is a meditation teacher that Ram Dass went to in India on the referral of Maharaji. And so anyhow, ever since then, it's been my favorite style, mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. And so then I'm really happy to do it at our class on Wednesdays. And matter of fact, I was in another meditation, a short class the other day, and the teacher asked me, what do you want to do today? And I'm like, anapanasati. And she's like, I know that's your favorite. And she did it. And okay, let me see what's going.
And Goenka was a fascinating teacher because he didn't come through the monastic tradition, which most of the teachers in Asia do. Goenka was a businessman in India. And he came to meditation because he was suffering from terrible migraine headaches and found that the pain meditation that's incorporated in the Vipassana tradition was extremely helpful to him. So he became one of the greatest Vipassana teachers of the 20th century in India. And a lot of the meditation teachers that I've studied with and that you revere, including Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, Joe Goldstein, all practiced with Goenka in India, and also, I believe all of them practiced at one time or another at courses that Ram Dass was present at. So he was a great teacher.
Cool. I was going to ask you, how long have you been meditating, John, and how did you get started on that?
Oh boy. I've been meditating this spring, so now it's March of 2024. This is 55 years I've been meditating. And I got started through some experiences that I had in the 1960s with psychedelics, and they allowed me to see something inside myself that I recognized right away was not necessarily an effect of the drug, that the effect of the drug was allowing us to see something that was always present. And to me, it was just the turning point in this lifetime. I'd had a lot of unhappiness as a teenager. My parents were both alcoholics. They were relatively affluent people and had everything that the culture says we need to be happy. They had a beautiful home. They had beautiful cars. My mother had beautiful furs and jewelry and, the whole thing. And we took wonderful vacations, but my parents were absolutely miserable and literally drank themselves to death. And that was all going on while I was a teenager, and I was suicidal. I wanted to kill myself because I couldn't see any hope, because all my parents had to offer me and their generation really was more of what they had and more of what they were doing. And I kept feeling, if I don't find some other way to experience life joyfully, meaningfully, then what's the use? And every time I would come close to doing myself in, I would hear this very sweet voice say, hang in there, it may get better. And one night I had this extraordinary experience, which is very difficult to describe, but in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Todal describes the void and clear light, which are these states of consciousness that are accessible to everyone under the right circumstance. They're what people meditate for decades to achieve. And simply when I had those experiences, I felt I have got to spend my life getting back into that space of consciousness. And when that question arose in my mind after the most powerful experience of all, I thought, how do I get there again? And I heard that same voice that encouraged me to stay alive say, meditate. And I thought, this was March of 1969, I thought, I don't know how to meditate. And that voice said, yes, you do. And I thought, well, that's far out. I was 18 years old so I just sat and closed my eyes. And what came to me was the Tibetan practice of Vipassana, which they pronounce Vipassana. And it's a little bit different than the practice I wound up doing, but I just started with that. And I would sit in my room, in my home in suburban New Jersey, And every day I started meditating. So that was how I got into it.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. It's funny when you're talking about how, in 1969, I mean, there wasn't much information about meditation or yoga even. And I was in the forest with my friend, and we were camping in 1969, and there was, I saw this person, and they were doing something in yoga. I think they call it the plow. And he was up, and he had his legs, and I thought, what the heck is that? I mean, it's similar, because that's when everything's just starting, and now look what's happened to the culture. I mean, meditation, yoga is big, and it should be. And
69 was an amazing year. It was the year that Woodstock happened. It was the year the Beatles broke up, I think, or shortly thereafter. It was, Ram Dass was beginning to become known. He got back from India in late 1968, started doing a lot of lecturing around the country in 1969. Swami Satchidananda appeared on the scene, and he spoke at Woodstock. And suddenly, I think it was an experience that was happening almost universally, where a lot of us had tasted something through psychedelics and then wanted to pursue that in a more healthy and stable manner. And along come yoga and meditation, which were the perfect vehicles to begin to experience that in a more controlled way and in a more sustainable way than psychedelics. So, yeah, it was a great time.
Thank you. Next thing I wanted to talk about was spiritual support, because one big thing Sacred Community Project offers is spiritual support. I mentioned before, through heart-to-heart, video chat, phone, email, handwritten letters support for people seeking spiritual direction and guidance. And matter of fact, I know you also offer that spiritual support. And matter of fact, one time we met, and because I was having an issue about a job that I had lost, and you gave me some ideas for what I could do about it. For example, I could write a letter to the person and mail it or not mail it. I think I finally went with let it go. And I did. Matter of fact, for 2 years, the people on that job were calling me free. And so when I lost that job, I said, okay, I'm going back to my legal name, William. Well, after I met with you, then I thought, oh, I feel that issue is over. And so then I said, okay, I'm free again. I could just call me free. And we even went to the Sitaram Dass and was visiting Hanuman Maui, and I was over there. And so they said, let's go to the beach the next day. And the same way we used to go with Ram Dass on Mondays. So we went over there, and I told the people, just call me free again. And they're all of Ram Dass's friends were going, free. It's so cool. But
but now you're free again.
Free again. Yeah. So I was going to ask you though. So what do you think is spiritual support, and what do you offer about that?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I started out as sort of when I had the initial experiences of spiritual awakening back in 1969. I had been in psychoanalysis for a couple of years with a very skilled psychiatrist. And I thought it was something that he did, and in a sense, I used to look at him as like my first guru. Now, that was 55 years ago. The practice of psychiatry is much different now. And basically, most psychiatrists, all they do is prescribe drugs and then monitor your experience on the, not psychedelic drugs. They're doing antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, etc. Although now there is a shifting into some microdosing usage of psychedelics. But with my psychiatrist, we just sat and talked. And that was an extraordinary experience for me, because I was seeing through him that I had a very myopic perception of the world, which most people do. We are taught and socialized to see the world a certain way. And we're taught in so many different ways, but basically we have a very specific perception of the universe around us. And what he did was he would say, well, I know you're seeing it this way, but just allow for the possibility, which was one of Ram Dass's favorite expressions, allow for the possibility that might be something different, that the motivations you're ascribing to other people might not be the same, as, you don't know what they're going through. And you're seeing things through your own desire system when, in fact, that obscures what you're observing. So he was really a very enlightened being, although he saw himself as a Freudian psychoanalyst, but he was quite an extraordinary man. And so that, to me, was an early source of spiritual support. I find, for the most part, that when people ask me for recommendation of where they can get counseling, I'm generally recommending someone who has a spiritual perspective, because I think that personally, the practice of psychology and psychiatry can get people stuck. They can help to a certain extent, but they can also get people stuck in their thinking mind. And there's a certain way in which the practice of psychotherapy will just keep you as a psychotherapy patient for the rest of your life, And I just have some questions about that. So spiritual support, to me, is something that I learned from Ram Dass, how to do it, basically. And Ram Dass, you mentioned that the Sacred Community Project offers spiritual support by phone or by Zoom, or, and which is what Ram Dass did, I would meet him in person back in the 70s and 80s. And sometimes we just talk on the phone. But what he was doing was very different from psychotherapy. It was interesting because he obviously had a very skilled background in psychotherapy. But he was also opening the door to an experience of life that's much more expanded than most psychology is capable of offering, even now. So while there are some tremendously gifted psychotherapists, I find generally that the ones who are the best are the ones who also have a very substantial spiritual practice.
Thank you. Oh, before I forget, I was going to say, on the Sacred Community Project, we have the regular satsang hangouts, but we also have some specialized ones. We have, for example, we have poetry potluck that meets on Sunday mornings. I say morning because I'm in Hawaii. And then, and so people can share, discuss readings and stuff. As a matter of fact, we're going to start a thing once a month. They meet every Sunday, but we're going to start once a month. We're going to discuss a certain book. And the book we're going to start discussing and going over is called Paths to God by Ram Dass. And that's based on the Bhagavad Gita. I think it's How to Live Your Life based on the Bhagavad Gita, Paths to God by Ram Dass. So we have that. And we also have another meeting that's called Grief Circle. I went to it. And in the Grief Circle, there's 2 facilitators. And it's kind of a very beautiful experience to go over there. And you have a book on grief.
Called Awakening from Grief.
Yeah.
Find your way back to joy.
Yeah. And I was going to say something about, I had a note about it. Let's see. I was reading that book, Awakening from Grief, and in it you suggested one thing is you could letting go of guilt, which was kind of the same thing about when I met with you. But so would you care to say something about this letting go of guilt from that book?
Well, that's a huge topic, but
it is.
I think one of the most effective ways to come at it is something that I learned from a fascinating man named David Hawkins. And he wrote a book called, I'm blanking, The Power of something, or no, Power versus Force.
Oh, yeah.
Power versus Force. And in that book, he was trained, if I'm not mistaken, as a medical doctor, a chiropractor, and a psychotherapist. So he was an interesting guy, and he was also very involved in 12-step programs because he'd had addiction problems. But he used a practice called applied kinesiology, which is something most chiropractors work with, and other kinds of healers work with it. And applied kinesiology is also called muscle testing. So it's where the practitioner will test you in certain ways, test to see what makes your body stronger and what makes your body weaker. So the characteristic example is they'll have you hold let's say a canister of white powder, right? And you don't know what it is. You hold it against your heart, and then you hold one arm out, and the practitioner will say, hold as strong as you can. And you hold it, and they press down on your wrist, and, suddenly you find that you're weak. And then they give you something that looks exactly the same, another white powder in a canister. You put it against your heart and hold your arm, and they'll say, hold strong. And that one, you're very strong. Now, this seems bizarre to people who aren't familiar with it, but it's fairly well documented and well accepted, especially in the chiropractic community. And so what turns out is, let's say the first thing that you held against your heart was a canister of saccharin, which is not a particularly healthy substance. And the next one you held against your heart was vitamin C. Holding the saccharin close to your heart causes weakness. It is all happening in your aura, basically, in your energy field. You don't even have to know what it is. The second one you hold, vitamin C, very healthy, makes you strong. So he devised a method of basically testing almost everything in human life and evaluating whether it makes us strong or weak. And that includes substances, foods, supplements we might ingest. It also includes thoughts and mind states. And through that, David Hawkins suggested that which is closest to our divine nature, or brings us closest to the God within us, makes us strong. And that which takes us away from our divine nature, or the God within us, will make us weak. Now, there's a very long introduction to your question, or the answer to the question, which is an interesting reflection. I'm not suggesting it's the answer, but it's an interesting reflection. He found that the states of mind that make us weakest are shame and guilt. And he said, which means that those two mind states are the farthest from our divine nature. They take us the farthest away from God, shame and guilt. Which is interesting because, so many religious traditions liked to use shame and guilt to try and teach you to be good, And he was saying that's ridiculous, because they don't. I mean, what you need to learn to live in your essential goodness is to experience your essential goodness, not to be shamed and guilt-ridden. So that was really interesting. A lot of people assumed that the mind state that would cause you to be farthest from your divine nature would be anger or hatred. And I mean, those are definitely not particularly healthy, but the even less healthy ones were shame and guilt. And of course, the mind states that make us strongest are love, kindness, generosity, feeling connected to other human beings and to the earth. It's fascinating. So that's what I would say about shame and guilt, that they are the most destructive states of mind we can experience. And if you shame a person and cause them to be guilt-ridden, it's much more likely that they will be self-destructive or destructive outwardly, and even become violent because of the amount of time they spend in those states. So that's why spiritual traditions generally focus on love. Love is good.
That remind me, one time I went to this workshop by Wayne Dyer was leading, and he went through the same experiment with strength. Mm-hmm. When you say something, I think he did it. If you said something that was true, your arm's strong. But if you said something that's not true, then he could just,
Right. Yeah. If you
similar.
He would do it like, say, the person he was working with, he'd say, tell me what your real name is. And you'd say, Free.
Yeah.
Or William. And then he'd say, now tell me a lie about your name. Tell me some name that isn't you. And then you find that you'd become weak. Yeah. So there's also that side of it, that was just an outward demonstration of the power of truth and the power of love. It makes us stronger. It's just better for us.
Speaking of love, in your other book, One Soul, One Love, One Heart, you said the path to happiness is the path of love. So anything else about that? It's just the same subject, I think. Yeah. Path of love.
The happiness is the path of love. Yes, it's, and I think, again, because this culture focuses so much on externals and gaining our value from what we achieve or accomplish or what we have acquired. And when it all comes down, no thing will ever make anybody happy. There's an interesting story that you've probably heard me tell at some point somewhere. But since my parents were affluent and extremely unhappy, and the culture is always telling us what you need to be happy is more money, more possessions, etc. And I was confused by that. As I got older and realized that in my life, including in my adult life, I've had the opportunity to know a lot of really wealthy people. And the truth is that most of them, I would say, are not particularly happy. However, every now and then, I meet a wealthy person who is obviously joyous and happy and, enjoying life. So I always ask them, what is it in your life that makes you so happy? And they always give me the same answer. And it isn't, my yacht, my airplane, my beautiful homes, all of that stuff. It's none of that. The answer they always give is helping other people. Using my money to help other people. In other words, giving it away. Now, they generally don't give it all away, but but that's the part of their life that they find the most joy from, is being able to be of service to other human beings or to animals or the earth or whatever it is, giving money away. Yeah. So that is an expression of love, and it's an expression of community, of connection.
Thank you. There's a couple of people I was going to ask you if you could maybe share something about. One of them was Sitaram Dass, who we said was the president and CEO of the Sacred Community Project. I have a lot of stories about him, but I was wondering if you have any. If you don't, it's okay. But I was wondering if you have any interesting story about Sitaram Dass.
Well, the main thing about Sitaram Das is that not a story so much as who he was at Ram Dass's home. And, Ram Dass, when he moved to Maui, had Dasima, Kathleen Murphy, come and live with him and take care of him and kind of be his assistant and companion and caretaker. And of all of those, he probably would have liked the title caretaker the least, but but that's what she was, and she took amazing care of him. And, she needed assistance at the house. So they started having one young man stay at the house, because generally they needed somebody who was kind of strong. And that person would, be the gardener and the repairman and the, whatever was needed, he would do. And Sitaram Das was, I can't remember exactly how many assistants had been there before him. Just a few, because he came fairly early in Ram Dass's life on Maui. But Sitaram Das stood out because some of the other guys that came to take care of Ram Dass, all lovely people. There wasn't a single one of them that, wasn't just wonderful. But some of them came because it was an opportunity to spend time on Maui. And, they would have fun on Maui while they were living at Ram Dass's house and ostensibly helping to take care of him. Sitaram Das hardly ever left the house. He was so devoted to Ram Dass and then to Dasima and to his practice. So he started, I think he learned how to play the harmonium there, and he also would play guitar, and he was just this extraordinary young man who obviously Dasima and Ram Dass dearly loved. And I just enjoyed so much being around him. And he's just a very special being. And his love for them and their love for him was very special. And I'm delighted to hear that he's doing what he's doing with his life now, which he moved to California. And is he in Oregon now? Or is he still living
I think he lives in Eugene, Oregon.
Right. He was living in Northern California for a while, and then I think originally from Oregon. But
I visited him many times when he was living in New Mexico.
Yeah,
that was before that.
Right. Well, he's quite something. And I will tell you this, I cannot duplicate the story because it was Sitaram Dass's story. and he would have to share it in his own way if he chose to.
Yeah.
But one night, uh, Ram Dass and Dasima had this very interesting relationship. I think the way she saw her responsibility in life was to keep Ram Dass as safe as possible and as healthy as possible. And that often meant that she was laying down the law about, when he could have visitors and when he could go out and enjoy himself, things like that. And there was a little tension between them about that. Now, one day, and Dasinatma knows this story now, so she asked me to come over to Maui because she wanted to go on vacation just for a few days. I think it was no more than 4 days, 3 or 4 days. But she said, I'm going to be away from the house, and I would like you to be here, she said to me, to just, be in charge. I was terribly honored, or wonderfully honored, I should say. And so I went, and she was there for the first few days, and then she was leaving. In the morning, the car came to pick her up and take her to the airport. And Ram Dass had rolled his wheelchair up to the front door of the house, and as she went down the stairs, and he was sitting in his wheelchair, literally crying. He was really sad to see her go. And it was a very touching moment. And she went and got in the car, and off she drove. And as he watched her drive out of the driveway, when she was out of sight, then he got this big smile on his face, and he turned to me and he said, "The cat's away." Now, I had said to Dasima that I would, Ram Dass loved to go out to a nice restaurant to have a nice dinner. And I said to her, I would like to take Ram Dass out on Thursday night or whatever it was. And she said, no, you can't do that because he has a blood test the next day. And we don't want his blood to be askew from eating the things he shouldn't eat. So I said, well, I'll make sure that he's very conscientious about what he eats. She said, no, don't do it. He'll need to get to bed early and so on. Now, I made the mistake, and I didn't do this consciously, but I just kind of wanted Ram Dass to know that I had the thought that I would like to take him out, but Dasi said no. Well, he says, if you want to take me out, we're going out. And I said, great. And the only other person at the house was Sitaram Das. I said, shall we take Sitaram Das? He said, yes, the three of us are going to go out to dinner. So we went out and we had the most wonderful time. We laughed and we all told stories. And the best story was Sitaram Das telling the story of his first trip to India. Now, that's as far as I can go with that. If he ever chooses to share it, that's up to him. But Ram Dass and I howled with laughter. It was just amazing. And, we're out in this fancy restaurant, a beachfront restaurant with the ocean, right there. Sorrento's was the name of the restaurant. You might have been familiar with it. Mm-hmm. So as we're leaving, we go and we get in I think Ram Dass had his Honda Odyssey van at the time, and I'm driving back to Haiku, to the house. And we're all like pulling out of the driveway of the restaurant, saying, oh, wasn't that wonderful? What a great time we had. And I said, Dasima would never countenance anything like this. And Ram Dass said, oh, no, that's right. No, she wouldn't go for this. But I'm realizing I've got to tell her. And I was going to have to face the music when she came back. She would not be happy with me, although he had his blood tests the next day and he came out just fine. And, he was careful. He didn't have dessert or anything. So, it was one of the most delicious nights I ever had with Ram Dass, and it was with Sitaram Das also. So
Wow.
that's my story.
Oh, thanks for that, John. Wow. I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, I heard something about part of that story before, and I thought, oh, yeah. And I remember the blood test came out okay. So good. We got that in. Important point. And then, yeah, I just was thinking this time we're talking right now just is like this is like a special time, just sharing this between me and you and everybody watching this podcast. Appreciate it. And talking about another person, Ram Dass. I mean, I know you were very close friends with Ram Dass for a long time. I mean, when I went to, you did a workshop one time at Hanuman Maui, Ram Dass's house. I think this was after he passed. And Dasima was even introducing you, and she was saying, like, Ramananda John is a very close friend of Ram Dass, so trying to get people to appreciate, the relationship and what's happening here. And so about Ram Dass, I mean, you must have a million stories about Ram Dass. Can you just share one short, maybe, I don't know, interesting one?
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, that our relationship was interesting because, many of his really close friends were the people who he spent time in India with in 1971. There was this, he met Bhagwan Das in, I guess it was 67 when he was first there and was traveling around with Bhagwan Das. But the rest of the Westerners who came in 71 when Ram Dass went to India the second time to be with Maharaji. And so I got to know him. I met him in 73. And that was because we invited him to come to my university, which was the University of South Florida in Tampa. And he came and, we had a wonderful time. And he stayed. We had him booked for 2 days. Oh, and he came with Krishna Das too, which was that was kind of a funny moment when there was a fellow named Rick Alter who was the program director at the university. He booked all the concerts and lectures. And so the interesting aspect of that story, not directly about Ram Dass, but I was walking across the campus one day, and this very tall fellow with a big red mustache and long red hair with a ponytail in the back, but he's wearing a tie, a very nice shirt and tie. And he came up to me, and I'm looking, I thought it's an odd costume. Even the professors didn't wear ties at the university. And this fellow comes up to me and he says, "Oh, hi." He said, "My name's Rick." And he extends his hand. And I said, "Well, my name's John. And I'm wondering what this is about." So he says to me, "What's your major?" And I said, "Religious studies." Now, I'm getting uptight because I'm thinking, this could be like a religious fanatic or a political fanatic or something, and he's going to try to recruit me for something. So I'm like looking for the nearest exit. And he said, "Oh, really? Religious studies?" He said, "What do you study?" And I said, "Well, mostly Eastern religions." And he said, "Oh, that's fascinating. Like what?" And I said, "Hinduism and Buddhism." So I'm thinking, well, if he's a fundamentalist person, he's probably this is going to be the beginning of the trouble. This guy, he says, "Oh, that's wonderful." He says, "Wow, amazing. I didn't know you could major in that here." He said, have you ever heard of a guy named Ram Dass? I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I have." And he said, "Oh," and then he said, "Well, I'm the program director at the university, and I set up all the lectures and workshops and concerts and things like that." And he said, "I've been trying to find Ram Dass to bring him here to do a lecture. Do you want to help me?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yes." I can't believe this has just fallen in my lap, So he gave me his card and he said, "Come meet me at my office tomorrow." So I went to his office and we talked it over. and he composed a letter, and it happened that I had a friend named Alan Cohen, and Alan had been a student of Ram Dass and Tim Leary when they were professors at Harvard, and Alan was a psychology student at Harvard. So I called Alan and I said, "Do you have any idea how we can get in touch with Ram Dass?" He gave me the address for Ram Dass's father's farm in New Hampshire, where Ram Dass was spending a lot of his time. We wrote him a letter. We didn't hear anything for several months. And one day, Rick gets a letter from him saying, "Thank you for your invitation. I would love to come to Tampa." So he came, and then a couple of days before he arrived, he wrote a letter that we got, and it said, "I'll be arriving with Krishna Das on Eastern Airlines flight so-and-so at, let's say 11:30 a.m. on the date." And Rick and I look at each other and we go, "Who's Krishna Das?"
Yeah.
And Rick just says, "I guess he's another member of the Das family." So we had any idea whether, he was male or female or Indian or American or what he was going to do until he arrived looking like Jesus. And so Ram Dass came, and meeting him was just extraordinary. And we had planned to take him out to lunch at the local vegetarian restaurant, which was called the Natural Kitchen in Tampa. And so we show up for lunch with a party of 8 people with Ram Dass. And the people that owned the restaurant were just blown away. A couple of them I'm still friends with on Facebook. And so Ram Dass was just an extraordinary presence. I mean, I never met anybody like him. And there was a moment when we were sitting at the table, and he looked across the table, and my eyes caught his eyes. And he just looked into my eyes, and I looked into his eyes. And it was like the whole universe fell away, and all that existed was Ram Dass and this amazing, radiant light coming out of his eyes. And it's quite a story. But then I had to drive him back to the university. I wasn't really capable of eating my lunch after that. But so all of us go back to the university. Anyway, we had booked him for 2 nights, and he wound up staying for those 2 nights. And then the second night, he was supposed to leave in the morning. And we had a little party for him at Rick's house, where Rick's roommate made Ram Dass a vegetarian organic pizza with a whole wheat crust, which he'd never had before. That was very novel in those days, 1973. And when he was getting into the car to go back to the Holiday Inn, he said, "I've been thinking," he said, "I've been in New Hampshire all winter, and it was so cold. And he said, it's been so nice to be here in Florida in the warm sun." He said, "And I don't have any place to go for a week, so I'm going to stay here." And then he would come over each night to Rick's house, and we just sit and have satsang, spiritual community. And it was just a small group of us, like 6 or 8 people in Ram Dass. Krishna Das left to go somewhere, I think. And so we had these very special evenings with Ram Dass, and he would talk to us, teach us things, and lead us in meditation. And that was really, I guess that's the story I wanted to tell, because that was so precious. It's such an amazing time. And he and I kept in touch after that. And a few years later, I started doing some work with him, and it was just amazing.
What you described is such a blessing. Wow. It's really sweet.
Yeah.
It reminded me, before I went on the retreat with Ram Dass, Sacred Maui Pilgrimage in 2012 in the spring. But before that, before I ever met him or anything, I came with my friend to Maui. We used to come for vacation. And I'm like, let's try to run into Ram Dass, by accident. And yeah, and we were at this restaurant one day, and my friend is very good at making things like that happen. I'm sitting there, and my friend goes, "Hey," and I'm looking, and I saw him sitting at the next table, and it was similar to what you said, because he looked at me with so much love, and so I just came up and met with him, and yeah, and so I know what you mean, and I think it turned out later I figured out what happened. I mean, of course, the main thing was the love and the meeting him, but he had a group with him, and that's he usually had the group of people who were there to be with him and support him, and so they were there, and I figured out it must have been Monday because it was in Kihei, and must have been that after he went to the beach on Mondays, then he would go out to lunch with the satsang with the friends, and that's where we happened to run into him. I mean, I was blessed too. I was able to go to the beach with Ram Dass on Mondays many times, and the reason that happened is after that retreat, at the last day, I was doing the retreat from home. I mean, I would stay at home and then I'd go during the day to the retreat. Some people who didn't live on Maui would stay at the hotel. Mm-hmm. So it was the last morning, and then I asked Mike Crawl if I should go to the breakfast. The last day I only had a breakfast. It was Monday. And he said, Mike Crawl told me, no, you don't need to go to the breakfast, but I invite you to go to the beach with Ram Dass. And I'm like, yes. And that's how that started. And I mean, for me. So that reminded me all that. I think the last thing before I give out some information about where to find these groups, I mean, where to find Sacred Community Project Discord and where to find your meditation class, is I had a bunch of words. Sometimes I just like to think about a word, and I have a bunch of them, but I think I'm only going to ask you about one word. There's a whole list here, like integrity, compassion, forgiveness, love, awakening. But the word, I wonder if you have any thoughts about this word, grace.
Grace. Grace. We say sometimes, like in telling those stories, that your meeting with him in the restaurant spontaneously was grace.
Yeah.
My having that fellow Rick Alter come up to me on the campus of the University of South Florida with 25,000 students, randomly walks up to me and basically says, I'm looking for Ram Dass. Do you want to help me? What could that be other than grace? So grace to me is, there are those moments in life, and we can get very esoteric in talking about what laws of nature or spiritual laws govern the unfolding of life on earth for human beings. And I think, so we have karma that we talk about, the law of cause and effect. And I would say, since I brought the term up, that I like to point out that karma is not punishment. That karma is the balancing of opposites. So if you lie, since we spoke about that earlier, someone's going to lie to you. It isn't that they're punishing you, it's that the universe is seeking balance. So that governs most of what happens, I think, in our lives. But for me, grace is that there's a little space, maybe it's a big space, which allows for the universe to perhaps override the laws of karma or enhance what the law of karma might have done otherwise, that allows for us to get what's sometimes known as a spiritual boon, a gift and an offering that lifts us up in some way. And that to me is grace. And I think that there's a story where Ram Dass asked Maharaji, named Karoli Baba, and he was trying to figure it out when he was in India with Maharaji, and he said, well, Maharaji, isn't everything grace? And my memory is of Maharaji said, I can't answer that in public.
Wow.
So grace, yeah, it's those moments of almost or perhaps even supernatural beauty. And
that
intercession, maybe divine intercession.
That remind me of, one of my main teachers is Ram Dass, but another one is Byron Katie. And because I had this issue many years ago, and it was trauma. So as a result of that, I was in like a trauma regarding just like a suicidal trauma for 3 years. And I finally met with Byron Katie, and in a few minutes, she showed me that I was okay. And that was the end of it. And I thought, well, the point of it is later, I talked to her many years after that. And I said, I told her, oh, thank you so much. You helped me in that, because that was the end of the trauma. And she said, what happened wasn't like she helped me, or what she said is she called it grace. So I love that. Yeah. Wait, before I forget, let me just go over 2 important things I really wanted to put on this, because we talked a lot about Sacred Community Project and especially the Satsang Hangout. So I just want to let people know that how to go to that. If you go on the web to sacredcommunityproject.org, then you'll see under community, click under community, and then click on online community, then join the SCP Discord. Under that, actually, there's a SCP Discord Hangout schedule, so you can see exactly when those meetings are taking place. The other thing I wanted people to know is if they're interested in your classes on Wednesday, highly recommend it. Another very beautiful meditative experience, sharing the love. So on the web, montclairfoundation.org, online registration here. The here is a link. If you click on here, you can sign up and join us. We'd love to have you.
If you click on here, you find enlightenment.
Be here. Yeah. Be here.
The alternate route also free is they could go to my website.
Oh, yeah.
It is www.johnwelshons.com or onesoulonelove.com. And you can go to the schedule of events, and that will take you each week. It shows the class with a link to the registration page. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much, John, for meeting with us today. It's been beautiful. Yeah. It's almost like grace.
Almost.
Good point. I think we're going to end. You have anything, or I think it's time? Appreciate it.
I'd just like to thank you again, and thank Sitaram Dass and the Sacred Community Project.